Greetings. Let us talk about the structure of an endoscope. There are several different types of scopes, but most of the scopes that are utilized for upper GI endoscopy, enteroscopy, colonoscopy, the structure is basically the same. There are some differences with the ERCP scope and EUS scope. So if we know the basic structure, we will appreciate how the scope functions, and if any problems arise, we can easily fix them. So here is a typical endoscope. Here I have taken the example of a colonoscope with the variable stiffness function. Let us look at different parts of an endoscope. Control section, that's where you control the endoscope function. Umbilical cord that attaches to the processor, which provides light and also has hookups to air, suction, water. Insertion tube that actually goes into the patient. The insertion tube is quite complex. Let us review the structure of an insertion tube from outside to inside. It has an outer polymer coat, a base layer, stainless steel wire mesh, outer spiral metal band, and inner spiral metal band. As you can see here, it is a very complex instrument with several layers of wall, and inside the wall we see different structures. In a little more detail, and how do they relate to the tip of the scope. It has air-water channel, suction/biopsy channel, water jet, lens or an objective lens, and a light guide. So let us look at this in a little more detail. Here is the light guide or the light port, and if you are wondering where does the light come from, when you hook up the umbilical cord to the processor, the light guide goes in there and the light from the processor is delivered through the umbilical cord down the insertion tube. Air-water channel or air-water nozzle, and if you press the air-water button or occlude the button gently, air or CO2 comes out. And if you are wondering how does air or CO2 come down, it is again at the light source connector. There is an air pump pipe and an air/CO2 connector. If you press down on the air-water button, small amounts of water comes out, and this is used to clean the lens. And where does this water come from? Again, close to the light source connector, there is a water supply connector, and that's where the water comes from. And we will trace the channels that take air and water along the umbilical cord and insertion tube. Here is a biopsy channel, and if you press, or the suction channel, Biopsy channel and suction channel carry the pathway in the insertion tube as a common pathway, and then once it goes to the control section, it splits into two. So the suction button is a red button, and if you press on the suction button and depress it down, it sucks the fluid, and the fluid goes up the insertion tube to the umbilical cord and then out through the suction connector. The biopsy channel, we talked about it. It is a common channel, and when you place a biopsy forceps through the accessory port, it comes out of the biopsy channel. Next, let us look at the different functions of the camera. There are freeze buttons, capture buttons, and special buttons. You could press one of the buttons on the top of the control section to freeze the picture, take a picture, and change the color or apply the narrowband imaging or one of the special electronic chroma endoscopy button and change the way you look at it so that you can define the nature of the problem. And then in some endoscopes, there is a near focus function as well. Let us look at the control dials on the control section. The control dials help bend the bending section or the tip of the scope up, down, right, left. So there are two control dials, one for up, down, and the other one to right and left, and both these control dials have locks so that you could move the tip of the scope to a particular degree, either up, down, right, left, and lock it in that position. In Olympus colonoscopes, they have a variable stiffness control just below the control section, and when you tighten it clockwise, the insertion tube becomes stiff. And this is used when you are going in and the scope insertion tube is floppy and is forming loops. You could cut down that loop formation by tightening the variable stiffness control control. So we looked at the scope, we looked at the structure, and let us look at the channels. So how does air insufflation work? As you can see, there is an air insufflation CO2 insufflation connector, and there is an air pump, and when you press on the blue button, gently occlude the button, then air or CO2 comes up, and that's the path. As you can see, umbilical cord, scope head, insertion tube, and through the air water nozzle it comes out. Next, if you press the blue button down, not just occlude, press it down, then small amounts of water come down to clean your lens. So we talked about air and water insufflation. Next, let us look at if you have a lot of fluid or there a lot of air and you want to suction that, you press on the red button all the way down. Once you press the red button, it suctions the fluid and air out through the suction to the suction canister. If you want to clean the field by injecting water, using the water jet by pressing on the foot pedal, this is where the water comes. As you can see here, there is a separate channel for the water jet and it comes out. I hope this session is useful in appreciating the structure of the scope and different functions, and learning this would be useful for your practice. Thank you.